Hi, Sherry. It's nice to see you today.
It's nice to see you, man.
I'm so glad
Thanks.
that you're here because I think you're just such a great expert on some of the themes that are in the story about um, what's happening with Inigo, what could be going on. And just to give the reader or our audience a little bit of information about you, you are a clinical psychologist with 30 years of experience
Yeah.
working with families. And can you tell a little bit about more what your specialty is? Because it's different and unique. I love what you do.
It's trauma based, working with the body. But it also works with anybody, even if they're not even, well, the way I see it is you go through life and you get some trauma. You're born and you're corralled into society, so your really true self gets a little bit sidelined, and
Yeah.
that's a bit of a trauma for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's difficulties in youth, there's even more difficulties. So I see everybody as being somewhat traumatized. So whether you're severely traumatized or just traumatized by life itself, what I do is, because trauma sits in the body, all of our when we process things as a young person, we don't have the cognition to really process what's going on. If something overwhelms us, then the minute we're overwhelmed, our frontal cortex is shut down
Uh-huh.
and we're no longer present, and we don't even process the trauma. We may even forget it. That's why
Yeah.
people forget
Yeah.
traumas. We don't process it. We just feel what we feel in our body,
Uh-huh.
usually a lot of adrenaline, or we go into paralysis, or we get angry and want to lash out.
Uh-huh.
And all of that is just created by the body.
Uh-huh.
Then as you get older, those bodily things, you learn to manage them somewhat. You morph them and cope with them, and they don't, hopefully rule your life, but they can.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're still in the body, and you still feel like, oh, everything's just fine, but I just feel this horrible angst, or I get, this, or I get that, and by going into the sensations of the body, um, people begin to witness those sensations for the first time from an objective point of view. And just doing that, oftentimes, if they're not really horrific due to horrific trauma, that relief of being with those sensations and realizing that they're not harmful, they're just sensations,
Uh-huh.
that can relieve a lot of psychological turmoil in and of itself. But often what happens too is people go into those sensations and they're with them, and then all of a sudden they get a memory. And the memory is
Uh-huh.
something from the past of their childhood. And they go, oh, this is like
Uh,
that feeling.
uh,
And then they connect up in a very safe way, rather than going right directly to these memories that are not safe.
uh-huh.
Once they
Mhm.
have felt the sensations and they're safe with the sensations, then the memory can come up, and then they're safe with the memory. And then there's dialogue about that and how they're feeling during their recollection of that particular memory. And it's a deep healing. Not everybody resonates with it, because you have to be a bit open to your own internal experience.
Mhm.
But I I like to think of it as a bit more. I mean, you never cure trauma completely, but I don't like the band-aid approach of putting things on top of it. I want to go to the source.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you go to the source, you heal what you can, and you actually put yourself on a trajectory to heal things ongoingly, because once you learn how to resonate with those sensations in your body and what they could possibly mean, it is incredibly calming. And then you don't act in a lot of ways that maybe you did before because you couldn't tolerate the
Yeah,
sensations. So
yeah,
you'd act out. You'd get angry when you didn't really want to get angry. And you
yeah.
go, I don't want to do that. Well, you do that because your body has these memories, these sensory memories, and they get triggered, and then you're off and running. But if you can recognize them and be with them, yeah, you can change a lot of how you feel about yourself, because you no longer feel like you are some crazy individual that can't control themselves.
Yeah,
You understand that this is a phenomena of the past, and that you have been somewhat helpless to it. But when you really spend some time with it and are able to be with it, you realize, oh, I'm not helpless to it. And that is incredibly empowering.
absolutely. And I, as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, what a way. How do you think? Can you tell this in a way that helps parents understand their reactions from childhood that might be influencing their parenting today? Because a lot of parents tell me how difficult it is for them when their child gets upset. And there's
Uh,
this idea that that their child triggers these unhealed places
yes, yes.
past. So can you share a little bit, make it like sort of dig in a little bit about how we can
Yeah.
do that?
Well, I can say what they can do, but somehow it's a process that sometimes it's hard to hold these feelings, because if they are having a reaction, um, that reaction in and of itself makes the parent or the individual feel shame.
Mm,
The minute they feel shame, then they're igniting their body even more.
yeah, it's a
So I that's why when I work with people, it's I'm there with them and guiding them. And if it gets a little too intense, we talk about that immediately, so then they can tolerate it. That's
uh-huh.
the
That's
Padog, and then her window of tolerance. It's that kind
uh-huh.
of a thing. If they can't tolerate it, and then so then they can be with it. But
Yeah.
it is theoretically possible to and usually I do these things after the fact. Their kid was having a meltdown, so they're having a meltdown,
Right.
and we process that after the fact and really go into what they were experiencing, and it helps diffuse that and loosen all that shame.
Uh-huh.
um, and then they feel better. So I do it after the fact, and theoretically people can, if they happen to have a moment in time, well, a lot of moments in time, parents rightfully so lose it. I have one of these instances of where they felt like they sort of lost control and they're not feeling good about it. If they can go back and really go blow by blow, okay, we were doing this, my child was doing this, I was doing this, and then things started to get a little bit edgy, and then my child did this, and then I said this, and what they're looking for is they're really trying to find that moment of intensity, of
Mhm.
where they just can't take this anymore,
Yeah.
and they go into this other persona, no doubt their parents persona, and by going through that after the fact, if they're able to do that, they can see how the whole thing evolved and how it sparked them, and they're able to be with that, and it just calms down that shame, and allows them, the next time, if they do it, if they're really able to do it, the next time they're with their child and the child has something that triggers them, the way I describe the process typically is their reaction will be less. Even
Mhm.
if they did get triggered, their reaction will be less because of going over the previous incident in detail increases the deep awareness of the situation. Once you've increased that deep awareness of the situation, then you that does not go away. That's why I kind of call it a bit curative because you're moving forward from
Uh-huh.
that point on.
Mhm.
And then the next time you may still feel like you lost it, but if you watch, it's qualitatively a little different. You maybe took longer to lose it,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
or you could lose it and still have this observation of, oh, I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it because
Uh-huh.
the awareness is there.
That's great.
That little, you know, observatory self has been
Great.
embedded by going over the reaction that you had that was very shaming to yourself,
Mhm.
and the awareness, yeah, once you get that deep awareness, it helps guide you for the future and the future and the future and in all encounters with people.
And then each time they have a situation where they lose it, then they go inside again and try to get calm and feel safe with that
Well, they go back and they
station.
recreate the scene. They
Uh-huh.
just go back to the scene of the crime
Yeah.
and just go through everything about it, pri- including what was going on prior,
Mhm.
because they may realize they were under a lot of stress
Uh-huh.
prior.
Right. Right. So many
And
are.
yeah, and so they go back and they see all the little particulars that
Mhm.
if they were stressed or if the child pushed a particular button or
Yes.
what it was. See, like, okay, if a child pushed a particular button and they see that, they go, oh, wow, it was that moment when my
Yeah.
child said this and I just lost it. Okay, well, if you can remember that and remember it from your observing self,
Mhm.
then you have added some awareness to it outside of the situation.
Uh-huh.
You know, the situation is over here and you're over here
Yeah.
witnessing it. And because you're witnessing it, you've embedded a new awareness of that button and how it gets you. And you have a felt sense if you can go into the body and say, oh, it did that.
Mhm.
Um, then hopefully in the future you're able to hear that trigger and go, oh, that was just like a stab in the chest, because it's good to know what your bodily sensations are
Uh-huh.
in the
Yeah.
moment. That was like a stab in the chest. So basically, when the child pushes the button and you register stab in the chest, you've already disengaged from the reaction to the button pushing
I
because
know.
you're talking about
Yeah.
stab in the chest.
Yeah.
And so that disengagement just from the trigger just allows you a little more time. And you may only take in the beginning a brief period of time and then you still lash out at the child. But because you had that brief period of time, the lashing out is probably less.
Yeah.
If you really look at it, it's probably less because of that awareness and that break in the triggering of your nervous system. You observed, you cut off your nervous system reaction. Thus, you had a different experience, even though it might be hard to see that you had a different experience.
Mhm.
And you keep really looking at those differences of experiences through the awareness. And before you know it, you're like, oh my God. And if you're not really that traumatized and you're already kind of aware of this stuff anyway,
Uh-huh.
well, sometimes you just find that, oh wow, I got completely, that's gone. I don't get triggered by
That's
that
great.
particular
Yeah.
button pushing at all anymore because I
That's
know
so
I know it's coming. That's
Yeah,
another piece of it.
exactly.
Being able to predict what's
Mhm.
happening. You know what's coming and it's like, oh, that again.
And then when parents recognize that in themselves, they can teach it to their child.
They can.
Yeah.
They can teach it to their child because um if they are aware of their own body, then like your one book, the big feelings book.
Mission control.
Uh, yeah, I use that term um, a lot if I'm talking to parents,
Yeah.
um, because they realize that they have big feelings,
Yeah.
and then they can say to the child, "You have big feelings. This is a big feeling."
Yeah.
Or after the fact, that was a really big feeling. What did that feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it must have been hard not to yell. Then it
Yeah.
must have been hard not to hit me.
Yes.
It must have been
That's a
hard
great
not to hit me
message.
with that big feeling. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. They
Yeah.
begin to have this their own self reflection. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what I'm trying to teach through the book. So this is
Yes,
going to be really
yes,
nice layering onto what I'm trying to do. If parents understand how important a role they have, I only can touch a bit of it. You've expanded so much more on it, but it's very complementary to what I'm trying to help parents understand as
yes.
well.
Trying to get the child to look inward, and in this book, looking inward and then saying, "Oh, what else could be going on?" But the minute they go in, I guess also I think in the book, uh you point out how the child can feel hurt,
Hmm.
and so when they feel hurt, if they're able to recognize they feel hurt, so then
Right.
because they're feeling hurt, their first reaction is going to be, they were mean to me, or they did this, or they did that. But the parent can help them see, you felt hurt, and then you thought of this, and this. But now you know you were hurt. And if you can just kind of hold on to that and set it aside, what other kind of things do you think could have been going on with that child if you're able to put that hurt aside?
And that's the book that we're
Yeah.
talking about today. Yeah, I heard you
Yes.
mention what could be going on several times because, yeah, it's exactly what it is. And a lot of times our thoughts are what drive those feelings of feeling hurt, misunderstanding, lots of times
Yeah.
social misunderstanding of someone's intentions, and then feeling hurt by it, and then lashing out.
And our thoughts do that, but what happens first is the hurt is a
Yeah.
central nervous system thing. And that's the piece that the parents are learning when they think about, if they were triggered and they, lost it, or, yelled at their child, or whatever. Uh, but the child can begin to register, oh, I hurt. And then because I hurt, I came up with all these thoughts about that person that weren't very nice. I mean, they were kind of like feeling like that person was out to get me in some way, or they were, trying to, be mean to me, or this or that,
Right.
because they realized, oh, those are the thoughts that come when we feel hurt, because
Mhm.
it's so hard to feel hurt. It's so hard
That's
to feel
so
hurt.
hard. So hard.
Yeah, yeah. And for them to know it's hard to feel hurt. We get hurt all the time in life. And for the child to know that the parents know, oh, yeah, I get hurt. Sometimes me and your father or me and your mother bicker a bit. We get hurt.
Mhm.
That's why we sometimes lash out with each
Yeah.
other, because we
Yeah.
get hurt.
Yeah.
Our bodies get hurt, and then we do that. And if the parents, by going inside and getting their own self-awareness of their own nervous systems and how they react, and then just, you know, get co-opted, their thoughts and their actions get co-opted by what they're feeling in their body. If
Mhm.
they can learn that, then they can show the child how they get co-opted
Right.
by the hurt and all that.
Right. And it's so interesting because so many times when I'm working with kids, I'll say, well, that's still hard for me. And they are always surprised. Like, really? Like, even I
Yes,
struggle with this? And,
yes.
I'm always surprised that they are
Well,
I don't know exactly what the thought process is, but maybe they think it's just what kids are struggling with,
you
but
know, it's our society, and it's our society of where, well, there are a lot more feeling books out there, and the movies, the Inside Out, and all of
yeah,
that. But typically, parents have not been raised in families that talk about feelings,
yes, uh-huh.
or have that deep resonance with their own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, it just doesn't flow in that
Right.
direction. So when you say it to a child, the child is like surprised, and it's nothing that the parents are doing wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that I think we're slowly evolving into being more internally aware.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's just not been present in our society. And I kind of even take it way back to just when civilization was coming online, the rational took over the internal. That's where I kind of see witches got burned at the stake because they were dealing more with the internal. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the people with you know very bourgeois, uh, monarchy kind of things, not necessarily the British monarchy, but just, mini monarchies of where the women were always not expected to have any feelings. They were
Oh
just
yeah.
always this little
Yeah.
engaging, and they always took, but they couldn't have any feelings. And so the feelings thing was just, cut off,
Uh-huh.
I think, over the eons, and that changes people's DNA too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
parents don't need to feel like they're not up to snuff because they're just a product of
Right.
history.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the whole DNA thing too, there's trauma with all of that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
carried
yeah.
from one generation to the next.
Yeah, what you mean, like with particular disorders like ADHD and things like that, or do you
Well,
just mean
the
the
generational,
generational?
yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. It's kind of in the DNA that you don't move and think in that way
Mhm.
because people prior to you didn't move and think in that way, and
Yeah,
their brains weren't wired in that
yeah,
way.
yeah. So
Yeah,
fortunately, I mean, with the Olympics going on and all the talk with Simone Biles, that
yeah,
awareness of all the things we're talking about is so much greater since COVID, since the Olympics, really. There's
yeah,
more awareness and so much less shame around doing that.
yeah,
Help, I mean, and bringing children in for help also, family therapy, all of that, because when I'm working with children, I have the parents stay for sure, because it
uh-huh,
is a family system. And when we
yeah,
heal
yeah.
one part of the system, other parts of the system get healed.
Yes, 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 exactly. Yeah, I see that in couples a lot. You work with one element of the couple, and the one element, either the male or female or whatever, they whatever they learn, they start to communicate with their significant other, and before you know it, the couple is healing from
That's so good.
the first individual's therapy.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So having the children there, even if they're playing, if they, if there's talk that they are, it's okay for them to be privy to, they
Mhm.
learn from their parents' dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Agree.
And
Yeah.
probably, as I think about it, because so much of the reason why this trauma thing is, I like to euphemistically call it osmosis. It's modeling is what people say,
Yeah.
but when you think about it in the nervous system, it's like osmosis. So if you have the children in the office with you and they're playing and the parents are talking,
Mhm.
they're getting this information
They don't miss a
implicitly,
thing.
and it's off like osmosis, and
Yeah,
so
I agree.
that's yeah, yeah.
And they're listening because they'll chime in and say, no, no, that's not the way it happened. Yeah, so we do have to be careful, but I do that for that very reason, because I believe the same thing. And they're
Yeah,
the family, and so we need to work with everyone. And siblings,
yeah,
lots of times I have siblings come along because that's part of the family, and that's
yes,
a lot of the conflict comes between siblings too.
yes.
Sets off kids and then sets off parents because the kids are fighting, just like what you said at the beginning of our discussion.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
yeah, so it's important to have everybody involved in figuring out how to do things differently and
Yeah.
learning about our bodies and our brains and how they work together.
Mm-hmm.
As you
Mm-hmm.
so beautifully described, did it so eloquently, Sherry, and you're so helpful the way you explained everything. You know what I'm going to do? I think that I'm just going to go through the things that we originally thought that we would talk about on my own, because what you've shared is so important, and I really
Oh, thank
just
you.
value this, and I'll just
Uh-huh.
do things on my own, because this has just been fantastic what you've shared with, and so helpful for everyone listening to this, no doubt.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah. I hope
so
so. It's
yeah,
yeah, I hope so.
it's been a very
It's an
stimulating.
interesting way I've kind of learned from different, body people that do trauma with the body, but then I've also kind of honed my own little
Mhm.
way of doing it.
Yeah.
So when I can share it and people can kind of, you know, see it in action and feel like it's been helpful, it's just really a delight.
Yes, exactly. That's why we do our work, because it's
Yes,
so
exactly.
rewarding to us to see that we can make a difference in people's
Yeah.
lives, and in ways that, like, parents are busy. It's like it's hard to
Oh,
even
Lord.
think through anything.
Well,
Have
that's
the time.
yeah. Yes, that's the thing, but that's what, if this skill is honed, you end up just doing it in the moment a lot of times. You maybe reflect on it a little bit later, but you don't have to read a lot of books and
Mhm.
learn and oh, I
Yeah,
got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this.
right.
If you learn this self-observation and then your kids learn their own self-observation, that is, I call it almost a practice. And
Mhm.
that's all you need.
Mhm.
That's all you need. And then if you
Yeah.
do happen to read something, it's you just take a few things from it, but you don't have to do a lot of extra work. I try and make it very organic. It just happens,
Yeah.
when you're there.
Yeah. So hopefully, what we've talked about today, as well as what are on some of my other videos, just a little bit. You never know what's going to be just the right message that someone hears that makes it.
Yeah, yeah. That
And
that's exactly it. Everything is out there that we need to know. It
yeah,
just is a matter of, did it click? Did that message click, or did
yeah,
this message click? And if it clicks, well, you're on a new path. But yeah, it's hard for messages to click with everybody all the time. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
And I see that a lot of parents like the same thing repeated in different ways. For different
yeah,
circumstances, you say the same thing, but in different ways with a different
yeah.
direction, and that benefits them similarly. Uh,
Yes,
because it is
yeah.
hard to, like, you hear it once, it makes sense in that situation, but generalizing it to other situations can be hard.
Yeah, yeah, until you feel it. When you start to feel it and you feel like, oh, that was helpful, then it's different. And then actually there's also this little bit of a dip I've noticed too. You feel it and you're doing it, and then you feel like, oh, I'm on a better track, and you're not practicing it as much
Mhm.
because you've kind of gotten on a better track. But then you also find yourself, well, yeah, it's just not working anymore. No, it's not that it's not working anymore. It's
Mhm.
that it's worked, and now you aren't as alarmed
Mhm.
by the circumstances with your child,
Mhm.
and so you're not observing like you were.
Uh, yeah,
So
that's a very good point. Yes.
yeah,
It's really easy to forget. to do that.
But the thing is, if they're feeling better, then
It- Yeah,
it's when they're feeling really, really challenged. That's when it's just the most intriguing and the most impactful. And
yes,
then after you're just more minorly challenged, it's it's like, well, I can deal with that. I don't, yeah, yeah. You just, but if you can keep it going,
can keep
you
getting it better and better.
it, it keeps getting better, and it gets better for the individual, for the parent in their own personal lives, because when
Yeah,
they go out, they're not with their spouse and they go out with friends, and maybe a friend, you know, feels like they were dissed by a friend. They can feel, and then they can kind of adjust and act in the way they want to act. It's
yeah,
just a practice for a better way of being humanly regulated.
right. And it so helpful to the kids then when we are, because we can model it.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And share
yeah,
that with others as well, our calm when things are challenging for some,
yeah,
we
yeah,
help them as we've been helped by others. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Our
And then
calm
we
is
build the empathy in kids to do the same thing, to reach out to other kids who are hurting or are feeling lonely on the playground or those kind of things. That's
yeah.
a lot of my goal again with the books, a lot of Seymour books that I've done that with, to try to model for the kids who do have the capacity to do those things. Do it. We need kindness. I see kids come all the time with kindness counts, shirts on and things like that
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
out there. And it's sometimes really hard for kids to know, well, then, yeah, I agree, but then how do I implement it? So
Yeah,
let's
and
with
part of
that.
that is because people are telling them you need to be kind and they're telling them this and you need to do this because that's kind and whatever. But if they can resonate with their internal compass and
Mhm.
realize, oh, this is what's going on in me, and that's so I'm going to act in this way rather than in this way. And then because they have that internal compass, they can register in another child what their compass might be, and then they just spontaneously are kind. They're not taking, a dogmatic, you know, lecture about being kind.
Yeah.
They are doing it from the inside out
Mhm.
because they're aware of their own feelings, and then they can resonate with the hurt feelings of somebody else and be there for them.
Yeah, that's such a, like you've made that point many times today, which is so great because every time you've said it, it's been more meaningful to me to really think about that from that perspective. And yeah, absolutely. I agree with absolutely that that's true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, again,
yeah.
Sherry, thank you so much. Unless you wanted to say anything more, I
I
want to,
don't think so. I don't
okay.
think
You've
so.
been so
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you so very much
Well,
for doing this with me.
I'm glad.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you,
All right.
man. It's been a pleasure.
All right.